Welcome to the Magic and Miracles podcast, where we share and explore profound stories that bring science and spiritual together in the most illuminating and unexpected ways. A miracle is defined as something outside the realm of what you believe is possible for you. These stories will lift and enlighten, showing you that anything is possible. I am your host, Nicole Majik. Join me as we dive into real-life extraordinary stories that will captivate your curiosity, shift your mindset, and bring healing to your soul. From real-life angels to the strange and paranormal, get ready to embark on a new, inspiring journey with each episode that prove magic and miracles happen every day. Hello and welcome to another episode, and I have a very special couple of guests here today with me. We've got Dr. Dave Bettenhausen, who serves part-time as the Vice President of Medical Affairs at a small Midwestern hospital presently. He retired after 25 years as a physician and 10 previous years as a cardiac surgical nurse. That's a lot of medical stuff, people, so get ready to deep dive into science. And we also have Carla Bogni-Kidd is also retired after 40 years of office managing for Dave and his predecessor. So Dave and Carla have had a close relationship since 1998 when Dave purchased the medical practice where Carla was the office manager. Together, they have been on a spiritual journey since the beginning of meditation in 2014. They've written 4 books already. The first, The Gift of Past Lives with Mother, Isabella, God, and Elizabeth, is a story of how they learned they have lived, are you ready? 29 past lives together. Their second book, Hell No, Reincarnation, can't wait to talk about this, is their reconciliation of their upbringing in Catholicism and other religions with what they now learned and believe about reincarnation. So great takes on that. The manual explores how God creates us and how that relates to our angels, spirit guides, astrology, traits, and archetypes. And her Hooba and His Rose is the 4th book, which takes place during the Second Temple period in Jerusalem. It's a love story, love of a couple, love of their families, love of a community, and love of the people for their God. This story is not about them, but they are characters in that time. Super cool. Dave and Carla have taught meditation at their local university as well as their senior center and service organizations. They've trained with Dr. and Mrs. Brian Weiss at the Omega Institute in past life regression after writing their first 2 books to learn more about regression therapy. So after their paths crossed throughout their lives, Dave and Carla discovered through meditation and regression that reincarnation is real, and they have over 29 past lives together. So I welcome you both here on the show today, and I am super excited to hear your take on what, like the other details of how this all began and what reincarnation and 29 lives. Welcome, you two. Thank you.
Hi, Nicole.
Hi, Nicole. Welcome. It's great to be on your show.
Yay.
I love your energy already.
Thank you. I love yours. And I know that we could talk for days. I already know this. Even the short conversation that we just previously had before hopping on the recording here, and just what the heck? How did this all start? There's a ton of synchronicity here.
Correct.
And so where do you want to begin? Because I could be all over the place right now.
So that we can get to some interesting things, let's tell you the quick beginning story. Again, I bought the office in 1998 and Carla was the office manager. We became really close friends immediately. Carla stood up at my wedding, which I'm no longer married to, but she's been very supportive all throughout. In 2014, as I would say, my practice is getting older, they sort of made us start electronic medical records in the office, and it was an ugly, ugly experience. I also was going through divorce, all sorts of things, and I became really despondent. And Carla said, "What are we going to do with you?" And you should say.
Well, actually, I was reading in AARP magazine, which dates us, and I found it interesting that this article was in that magazine, so it caught my eye, and it was talking about all the benefits of meditation, which, with Dave being a physician, I figured I could reach him on that level because there's so many benefits besides opening yourself up, closing down all the electronics so that your spirit guides and the spiritual world can reach you. If you never shut down and quiet yourself, they cannot reach you. So that's, ARP magazine didn't say that. It said helps you sleep, lowers your cholesterol, lowers your high blood pressure, your cortisol, which makes you gain weight, helps you with sleep, if I didn't already say that. And there's also big Fortune 500 companies that have a meditation room because they have realized that if people meditate regularly, they are much more productive at their jobs. So knowing all this.
So let me jump in real quick. Meditation, as a physician, as I did the research on it when we started to have experiences, it does raise serotonin and dopamine, which are actually parts of drugs we give people who have depression and anxiety. It lowers cortisol. It's really very interesting that during all the stress that this was occurring, I kept gaining more and more and more weight. After meditation started, I kind of set a goal to become a better self. And with the drop in cortisol, I lost 102 pounds in a year.
Wow.
So I'm going to tell it also does lower blood sugar, lowers blood pressure. It doesn't do what medicines does, but it certainly does an adjunct. And if everybody started that way, we'd start to be healthier.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
So anyway, I brought that into Dave and I said, do you want to start to meditate or shall I call a counselor and see, if you want to go in and talk to somebody? And of course, being a man and a doctor, he said, well, let's just try meditation. So the entire office decided that we would meditate before the patients began in the morning. So the first morning, we all mentioned how it was very difficult to shut our minds down. The second morning, we all saw different colors and didn't know at the time that those were our angels, but we all saw different ones. The third day, the girls said, we'll just do it at home because they didn't want to come in at 7:30 before the patients to get started. So on that third day, Dave and I went ahead and meditated. We had the calming music and we were sitting in the break room. There was no lights on. We had a candle lit. And we meditated for about 35 minutes, and then we heard people coming in. And as we went to our adjoining office, Dave came up behind me and he said, Carla, I know you'll think I'm crazy, but I think I was talking to your mother. Now, that caught my attention because one, he never met my mother. She had died 18 years before. And two, I'm thinking to myself, why didn't you come to me? I was meditating too, So anyway, I said, what do you mean she was talking to you? And he said, well, she was very jovial. She kept laughing, but she kept showing me a shoe. So I went over to my computer and I Googled ballroom dancing shoes, and like 60 or 70 pair popped up on the screen. And I said, which shoe? And he pointed to the exact one my mother wore. My parents were ballroom dancers and she always wore that type of shoe. We didn't have a lot of money. So she took the same pair of shoes, and back then they were satin. She would re-dye them to match whatever. And it was a short pump, open-toed sandal. And my sister also worked in the office at the time, and she went in the back, brought up her wallet with a picture of my mother, turned it to Dave and said, is this who you were talking to? And Dave got very emotional. And I said, we said, why are you emotional? And he said, because that was who I was talking to, and it felt very spiritual. So of course, it's like, to heck with the patients. We want to just meditate, but the patients were all coming in. So, at lunchtime, we meditated, and from then on out, we kept meditating. And our first book is called The Gift of Past Lives with Mother, Isabella, God, and Elizabeth, because that's the order they came to us. My mother came first, and then a few days into meditating, Isabella came. And Isabella told Dave that she was his spirit guide, and she had been with him for over 6,000 years. And that she knew everything about him. She was always beside him. She is tethered to him and God, not literally, but figuratively. And then a few days after that, we found out that my spirit guide was Elizabeth. And in between there, because we were coming in every day with questions, one day I said to Dave, "Who is God?" And this was during meditation, and Dave got very emotional, and he had an experience.
I heard, when I say heard, nobody understands this exactly. It's like I experienced this. It's like suddenly I felt it, heard it, knew it. I heard I am. I heard or felt overwhelming love and comfort to such a point that nothing else at that moment even mattered.
Your presence.
Presence, absolutely. And so, Carla starts writing notes down and asking questions every day. And we keep meditating. And
every question you can think of, is this right? Are we going to hell? Is there a hell? What about abortion? What about religion? What about marriage? We wrote everything down because Isabella, and if you will call our council of 12, we're all talking to Dave. Now, Dave is very gifted. We don't like to put a label on it, but we'll call him a mystic, because he can speak to Isabella and he can go back to any life he's previously led. I've taped him in the middle of them. He goes back right to it. It's not like a past life regression. He can jump right back into that life and talk to me just like he's talking to me now. So we kept doing this, but after a couple of weeks,
I had what I'm going to call the first real memory. And in that memory, it was actually in this life from a time when I was 3. Now, kids really don't start to have decent recall until 4 or 5 of things that long ago. But I remember getting in this blue sedan, driving all the way from Nebraska, because my father was actually going back to school on the GI Bill. He had been in the Korean War, and we went to Boston. And I remembered married student housing in Boston. And then suddenly I remembered running on the beach in Boston. And I was running on the beach in Boston. I was screaming and yelling, and I could see Ferris wheels in the background and a roller coaster and the little souvenir shops. And suddenly I heard this little girl yell, "Be quiet, you're bothering my family." She ran over, she pushed me down, sat on my chest, gave me a kiss on the forehead. In the background, I hear this woman say, "Carla, that's not how little girls act." And this little girl jumped up, put both hands on her hips, and she was standing there in this little 2-piece blue ruffled bathing suit. And I was telling Carla and Paula in the office this memory.
And I looked at him and I got a chill at my back and I said, "Dave, that was me." And I remembered it because I was the youngest of, 5 girls, good Catholic family, but my parents were always splitting up because they couldn't get divorced, right? They were Catholic. But this particular day, they were back together for, I don't know how many, what number it was. And we didn't have a car. We weren't well off. So Daddy rented 2 cabs and we went to Revere Beach. Now, Revere Beach, when Dave started talking, my sister and I both knew there was an amusement park with it. So as he mentioned these things, we knew exactly what it was. And as he talked, couldn't believe it. When we arrived that day, I did not have a bathing suit, and I normally would have inherited one of my sisters. So we all went across the street. My parents couldn't afford it, but they bought me my first brand new 2-piece blue ruffled bathing suit. And I mean, it's one of those times that it's etched in your memory and you never forget it. So, we thought, what the heck? We didn't keep in touch after that. That was it.
Yeah, because I drove back at the end of the summer. We went back to Nebraska.
I did have to share my sandwich with him that day because I pushed him down. That I knew.
Yeah. So, we're like, this is very strange. All of these things are happening around us. We keep meditating. And then I had another memory. And in this memory, I was standing in a dark alley. I looked across the alley, and there was this woman standing there. Now, I knew it was Carla. She didn't look exactly like Carla.
Younger, thinner, prettier. Yes.
No, but
yes.
And so I saw her standing there, and then I saw 2 large flashes, and I heard a bang, and I realized I was shot in the chest and was falling back and was dying. Isabel's like, it's one of your past lives. Don't worry. And then the next day, I got more of the story that happened before I died. And I had met her on January 10th, 1925 in Ashland Auditorium in Chicago when I was going to the wedding of a man named Angelo who used to come into the bank where I worked. Now, I have to tell you, I didn't know there was an Ashland Auditorium in Chicago until this memory. Now, there is one, and it looks like my memory because I remembered running up the stairs, seeing Ashland Auditorium above this. But I went into the wedding, and I was sitting there, and the same woman that I saw in the alley walked out on the wedding and was the wedding singer. And she sang the Ave Maria. It was beautiful. And I thought, I have got to meet her. And I met her at the reception, ran around till I could find her. She tried to blow me off, but I kept pestering her. I asked her to go to breakfast the next morning, sort of desperately at the last moment. And she turned and said, maybe I'll meet you at Marino's. Marino's is still a restaurant in Little Italy in Chicago. So she showed up at the wedding, and she showed up for breakfast, and we went along the Chicago coastline for a walk. And it was winter, it was cold, she had a big wool coat and this white hat pulled down on her head. And as we were walking down, she told me she moved to Chicago to become a dressmaker and a singer. And she told me her name was Ruby Donaldson from Bullock, Georgia, that her parents' names were James and Anna Donaldson. And I'm like trying to tell Carla all these things. And as I'm telling her, she's like, I can find something out here somewhere. You have details that I can't believe.
And it wasn't that long ago. So normally you can find something. So of course I went to ancestry.com and I did find Ruby Donaldson. There's a lot of Ruby Donaldsons out there, but this was 1904. The parents were James and Anna Donaldson, one of 11 children. Found all of that through census and pictures and other things.
Birth records.
Yes, and then I went on to some old newspapers in Chicago and found the wedding on January the 10th, 1925 at Ashland Auditorium of Angelo, Jenna, and Lucille Spinola. And he was a mobster right before Al Capone. And this was my boss when I was Ruby, because I was a flapper and a singer at the Speakeasy DeAndre's. And so I called Dave and I said, well, you're not cracking up because I did corroborate some of that information. So we just decided we would keep meditating, and certainly there would be more things, we'd get more answers. So we kept asking questions. We have journals and journals and journals.
So, yeah.
Yes.
So Nicole, the first thing is I tried to start researching meditation and found out that during meditation, we have increase in alpha and theta waves in the brain. Increase in alpha and theta waves in the brain are times when people have memory.
Yes.
So during meditation, you have memory. During the time between wake and sleep, you have memory. During the time when most people are hypnotized, they have memory. And so I'm like, so there's something here that's real that ties into science. You know, I'm already losing weight like it's easy, like I've been my whole life fat, and now I'm losing weight, boom, it's falling off. I lost like 16 pounds in 3 weeks and then started losing 2 pounds a week and 2 pounds a week. I'm like, okay, something is here. I'm connecting with something that's different. It's changing me. I understand this is different, and I'm connected to something that I know is real to me, whether it is to anybody else. And it started getting connected to Carla, it's real. And then the day happened where I came in to tell more of the story of Ruby and JJ, and I'm standing in front of Carla, telling her the story, and Carla starts to finish the sentences. And it changed.
I started asking him, like, was Ruby's apartment like this and this and this? And he said, yes. And he would say something and I'd answer like Ruby would have. And I'd say, you know, was was I wearing this or doing this? And he'd say yes. And then all of a sudden, it's like somebody turned a switch.
And we were both talking to each other as Ruby and JJ.
And we both freaked out because it was very strange. And we were both married to other people. So it was like, we don't feel that way.
We can't do this.
But we did that second. Yes.
Wow, that's incredible, right?
Yeah.
Because the level at which you guys are tapping in, and both of you at the same time by this point,
Yes.
really tapping into that consciousness and the past lives and the memory of that, and with the vividity that you did. It makes me want to ask this question about,
Please do.
why don't people remember their past lives? Like, why is it that most people don't? And, what purpose would that serve? And what purpose does it serve to remember it? What are you getting out of it? So I know that's a lot in there. So whatever you take from
So
that.
the first thing I'm going to tell you, Nicole, is that we wouldn't be able to handle all of the information in our mind at one time. So it's all pressed subconscious. Like when you do even a past life regression, or I'm meditating and I start to come, it becomes the next 2 hours of that past life. Well, you're not living this life at the moment. It literally becomes more than you're not watching a movie, but it'd be like watching, if you knew, I have 42 past lives, Carla has 34, we had 29 together. But if you tried to connect with that life 100% and know it, you would not have this life. You would become obsessed with everything, because you'd be sort of like watching that past life 100% of the time. Then what purpose would you have for being here?
And honestly, I do talk to a young man that's in Romania, and he feels from a past life that he was a woman and he had a couple of kids, and he knows that something terrible happened to him. Now, I know from talking with Dave and Isabella that he was brutally murdered and didn't get to finish raising his children. And that's what his issue is. And I've tried to guide him and say, why don't you have a past life regression with somebody reputable so you can get past this? Because we're not allowed to divulge everything that our spirit guides tell us, because it cannot interfere with other people's past. And he's quite young, and he has to be able to get to the point where he can handle it. If we remember a lot of things that have gone on, some people that have been raised in religion would be so frightened. Like, there's near-death experiencers that say, oh, I didn't go to heaven. I didn't see God. I didn't see Jesus. I went to hell. And to that, Isabella has said, no, you didn't. You had a past life where you either were burned at the stake, or maybe you were one of the Christians that Nero was taking care of and burning. It wasn't that you went to hell. It's that you were in so much fear and you were so pre-programmed with your religion that the second you saw an instance where there was fire and you were burning, you immediately thought it was hell, because that's what you knew. And that's not what it was. So a lot of us cannot handle what's going on. Now, if we understand that we're infinite human beings, our soul cannot be killed. It cannot be burned. Then there's no fear. And then the people that say, why did God take my baby from me? God did not take your baby. Your baby knew ahead of time that it was coming here to help you or somebody else with a lesson. Your baby never intended on staying. Your baby agreed to come here to help you or the doctor or the nurse or somebody else that needed help. I mean, I've lost a couple of babies. It's so easy now to know why, and to have comfort in that and know it happened because they were helping me or they were helping somebody else. So, it's karma is not punishment. Karma is another chance
to learn.
Reincarnation.
Yeah, I feel like fear has such a grip on so many people, because we are taught fear in all ways, all kinds of
for control. Yes.
control, or to teach a lesson, or to show you a way without, even parents, they'll use fear
Always.
To keep kids from doing stuff that they shouldn't do, or whatever the case. And what I've had experiences with is in connecting with that other side, whenever something was, and I can't even say it's scary, but not scary. It's scary, but not scary. And
I know what you
Right.
mean.
because it's showing you a fear that exists within you. And
Yes.
when you see it one way, because it's just like that, we see the world as not as it is, but as we are. And when you see something in that's so personal in the visionary sense,
Mike, I'm gonna count.
and it's scary, it's because it's showing you this fear for you to move through. And if you can see it from a different perspective of how it's not something to be feared, you then start to see the envelopment of the all, right? Because things aren't
Well
good
put.
or bad. It's everything encompassed, and it all depends on what perspective you're viewing it from. And that's something that I think is a really difficult concept for most people to wrap their head around if they haven't had some kind of spiritual transformational experience or near-death experience, or vision, or even like sometimes people will use psychedelics and see something on the other side and be able to understand these very deep concepts. So that being said, how can these past life regressions help people with overcoming those fears that are so locked in and traumatizing? Because I'm just going to toss out the word epigenetics, whether it's past lives or ancestral, the epigenetics, they're locked into your physical body. Even when you change your mindset, the physical body still has this hold to be released. So that's how I see it. But I want to hear in your words how some of these past life regressions, or whatever it is, whatever you term what you guys are doing together, is that a past life regression, or is that just a conscious communication, like tapping into the past life? What does that actually mean, and how can it help people to overcome those traumas?
Well, first thing, we really believe that people should start to meditate regularly, because when you start doing it regularly, perhaps you might see a face pop in, or you might see some colors pop in. You might see a little blip of a past life, and you should write all those things down. And that could be a little scary to you if all of a sudden you get a face right here, which I've had, and you probably have, and Dave has certainly. But you don't know what that is. That's a face. Now, the way Dave sees it and the way Isabella has explained it is that if it's on your left, it is your spirit guide or your angels or God, Jesus, your counsel. If it's in the middle, it's usually a past life memory. If it's on the right, it's people that are waiting to reincarnate. Every once in a while, they're allowed to pop in and talk to us. So if those things start to happen and then you get used to it, you won't have so much fear. Because if you go to a reputable past life regressionist and they take you to a spot that scares the holy crap out of you, you will have a really difficult time learning anything from that session. So you need to work your way up so that you're used to a face popping in, or all of a sudden you go from life to that dark time between to another life, and you don't get all wigged out and say, what's happening? Take me out of this. And with past life regression, all you have to do is open your eyes, but people don't understand that. So
well, because it's like a train wreck. You can't stop. You don't want to open your eyes because you don't want to stop what's happening.
Yes,
correct.
But you want to open your eyes because you want to stop what's happening.
Yes.
So Nicole, I want to try to make a comment on your epigenetics, just a little. There's certainly some form that we don't understand of a DNA memory where certain things are turned on ancestral as it passes through you.
That's in the manual, by the way.
Yeah. So there are parts of this that's ancestral. And it makes sense because a lot of times people return with the same group of people. So they do return within family groups or soul groups. So there could be some true genetic parts to this that's being passed. Then there's this thing we call soul memory, which is something that passes with us in our subconscious. And I'm going to give people an example because this makes it easier. We don't always remember everything, but everything still stays with us. So I want you to think like the first time you were a child and you touched something that was hot and it burned you. The next time you touch something hot, you pull back faster because that first memory is still in your subconscious. The same thing is true if it occurred 4,000 years ago and somebody shot you, or you touched something that was hot, or you were chased by an animal. So now you have a actual natural fear if you were chased by a bear 4,000 years ago, that if a bear chases you, you should run faster. Does that mean you have fear, or does that mean you've learned something that protects you?
Maybe a little bit of both, right?
Maybe a little bit of both. So that could follow you. Now, the other part of this that's very interesting is there are a difference between when your soul enters the womb, and this is something that Isabella's tried to explain. And so the earlier your soul has entered the womb or entered the fetus, the longer your soul has time to affect your genetics. So
That's interesting.
So if you enter early, you have a 9 full months before birth, and you actually are going in early at the time when the fetus is developing. So if it's a 1, 4, 8 cell, and it hasn't even differentiated yet, your soul memory will enter early and help affect the differentiation. That's why some people do look a little like they have in past lives, if you've entered early. If you enter late during the gestational periods, then the genetics you have from your parents become more strong. And so you will look more like your parents, and those genetic factors won't come into play. That makes some sense. So you have time for your soul to interact with the fetus early while it's still changing. And some people with past life memories, interestingly enough, when they do studies on children, there's about 20% that actually have scars, birthmarks, and things in the same place, because those people have actually, their soul entered early and were able to affect their outcome.
Dave and I both have neck issues. In our last life, we were Katie and Johnny, a brother and sister. I was 6, he was 4. It was Christmas Eve. We were playing on our 3-story staircase, and we fell to our deaths. We broke our necks.
Oh
we
my
carried,
goodness.
yes, we carried that with us. And I also, in this life, very early, I had a recurring dream until I was, I don't know, maybe 10, that I was thrown off of something or falling from something. And I landed at the edge of the water, and I opened my eyes and I could see starfish and rocks, and I knew I was in the water. Well, Ruby was indeed murdered and thrown off of a bridge, I think it was, into the water. And so we carry those things. And a lot of times, like fear of heights, fear of fire or water, it's definitely, so you do remember bits and pieces. And the reason a lot of people go to past life regression therapy and it helps is because they are carrying one of those fears. And if it's opened up and it's a good therapist that knows where to lead them, then they can get past that fear and stop carrying it with them. And maybe their behavior changes. A lot of things change once they understand why that happened.
So what are some of the things that people could ask or, need to know to find a good therapist?
Well, if they tell you right off the bat that you need, 5 sessions and it's $400 right now, it kind of sounds like they're, less interested in helping you and more interested in taking some money to the bank. Having said that, like any therapy, you do have to pay and your insurance doesn't cover it. So,
and many of the sessions are 3 or 4 hours long.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so it won't be cheap. We do it mostly with friends, family, and people we know,
but we don't
charge because we just want to
help them.
Help
yes.
Them. But for especially during COVID, people had to set up and do Zoom and do all sorts of things. So there are costs involved for everybody, or if you meet them in an office space, there's costs for their office. So it might not be strange for it to be $300.
But just, ask the appropriate questions.
Yeah.
If they seem like they're less interested in you and your problem and more interested in making money, well, that's a red flag. We know several of them, but I have not been personally regressed by any of them. So it's hard to say who's good, who isn't.
Yeah, there probably are, I think there's really three groups. I'm going to say Dr. Brian Weiss, who's one of the first psychiatrists who sort of happened upon past life regression by accident. And then there's certainly the Dolores Cannon, QIT, quantum something.
Yeah.
Her group, Dolores was an incredibly strong Christian woman to start with.
Gifted.
And incredibly gifted.
But
they
our
all
beliefs
carry it
differ than hers. She thinks you kind of do your own thing and make your own rules and create your own situation. And we know that's not the truth from our spirit guides. We follow what God, our spirit guides in the council, tell us to do. We have one choice, and that's our archetype. Our traits and our astrological signs are dictated to us for a reason, because our astrological signs go hand in hand with our karma. Why are we coming back? Why are we being reincarnated? Because we did something that was less positive and more negative. So our angels, in the manual, that was our third book, there's a color chart with our astrology, our astrological sign and how it relates to one of the 5 simple rules, which early on Isabella taught us. If you want to get through life and get off the karmic wheel, you live a life that's without conceit, jealousy, selfishness, and unforgiveness. Do everything out of love and compassion. And when you think about all the different, if you want to call them faults that we have, or the negative things that we do, they all fall under one of those traits, and or whatever you want to call it. And every time you do something, if you think to yourself, was that jealous? Was I being selfish or unforgiving? If you stop yourself, but if you know what your astrological sign is, then you know what you were doing in the past. And that's why God gave you the angel of, for instance, we both fall under selfishness, which was horrible when we found that out. We were like, we're not selfish, but we were in our past, because as Ruby and JJ, the star-crossed lovers, we didn't think about anything except being together, and a lot of people suffered because of it. So in our last life, it was very short-lived because we were just little kids. We didn't create karma because we died early. But in this life, God gave us the angel of selfishness. We fall under Mariel's Legion, the yellow angel, to make sure that we will not make the same negative choices to get past it. So that's a nice little gift that God's given us.
So many things are just flying through my head right now about these things. So reincarnation, the Bible, synchronicity, just all these things, and learning lessons, and whether you're going to go to heaven or hell. And I feel like, from my near-death experience, and I'd love to get your take on it from what you've experienced, is it doesn't really matter what you do, right, wrong, indifferent, because it's not good, bad. You're exercising your free will, right? And in that free will, you get to choose. And yes, maybe there are these lessons that we are meant to learn. And well, if we don't learn it this time, well, we can go ahead and learn it next time. We've got to have learned something this time around. So you can either slow go it, or you can accelerate the process. It all depends on what you choose in your free will. And when we're taught to fear whether we're going to heaven or hell, I feel like that some of that gets stripped away and washed away in the ability to fully live this life.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I'm going to tell you, this is still my favorite Isabella lesson, which is you know you cannot love and hate at the same time. And so and fear is absolutely the opposite of love also. And so you can't fear God and love God at the same time. It's not possible. And so if you're looking at a biblical story that looks scary, like God is some sort of maniacal thing that every atheist says, they say, God, how could God kill babies? And how could this happen? For Isabella says, every one of those experiences is but a moment in your existence. It's like the turn of a page in a book. It's gone in a second. If you suffer, there's a reason. Because you'll learn a lesson. Mankind does nothing better than overcome that which is the worst things that happen. And mankind feels successful when it overcomes.
And we're not Buddhists, but the Buddhists do have a lot of really great ideas. For instance, if you are suffering, now we could all be in pain, but if you're suffering, it's because you're allowing yourself to suffer.
Yes.
And if you're allowing yourself to suffer, then you're not going to graduate, as we like to say, because here's a really good example. Dave's father, in a couple of past lives, one of them way back, he was a slave trader. So he took people from as slaves, chained them to his boat, broke up the families, took the father or the mother or the kids or whatever, and brought them over here to the Americas and sold them. So in a past life, he wasn't, he was doing things to break up other families. He was doing things, not thinking about compassion or love. He was only thinking about making money. In this life, he was a very, very nice man. He was a high school principal. And the last 20 years of his life, he had Parkinson's. He was chained to his wheelchair because he couldn't do anything else. But he overcame all that. He wasn't, he always tried to smile, even though he had the Parkinson's mask.
Yeah.
He was funny, he was nice, he was kind, and he didn't let Parkinson's define him in this life. So it depends on what you choose to do. Our yoga teacher has Parkinson's, and luckily she's very open-minded. And we gave her the first book, and we've had these discussions with her, and we told her, your Parkinson's is actually a gift, because look what you've done with this. You're now helping other people. She's like a delegate for some organization, and she's doing all of these things. And if you can look at it that way, if you can look at those attachments to karma as a gift, a second chance, instead of, look what God did to me. No, I didn't do it to you, because it's something you past and you just need to learn. Well, my boyfriend cheated on me, because you cheated on him in a past life. How about that?
Don't play the victim.
Yes.
That is one of the lessons we've also learned.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the thing is 85% of people out there are living in that victim mode.
Mm-hmm.
And
Correct.
that's part of helping with this podcast in particular, is sharing these stories to give that insight, give an awakening, or something that maybe one person out there can latch on to something, relate to something, and have one of those aha moments saying, oh wow, like there is something that just triggered in me to go ahead and learn my lesson, or become a better version of myself, or try this thing out, like meditation. What is that?
Yeah.
Let's go try it. And see what
Gee,
happens.
I hadn't thought about it that way. Again, our yoga teacher was talking about this couple that they're going to France with this other couple. And the man is much older than the woman. And so our yoga teacher was saying, how am I going to spend 2 weeks with her? She's so young. And I said, well, Barb, did it ever occur to you that you had a past life with her and you are now in the teaching mode? Maybe you can help her. Maybe she married the older man because she had no father figure. Maybe in the past, she was your mother and now the tables are turned, but it's now time. And she looked at me and she said, I never thought of that. So if someone can just, flip flip the table. Try and think, instead of judging like it's so easy for all of us to do, try to put yourself in their shoes. It's easier that way.
Just jogged my memory of years ago. So my daughter is currently 14 years old. And when she was little, like before she even came through, I felt her spirit and everything. And there was a lot of communication. There's a deep connection, even in the womb, between her and her brother, and one of her brothers, a very specific, like special connection that if he entered the room, he didn't even have to say anything. But if he did say something, I mean, she would move wherever, like inside of me, she would move in close in that direction as possible.
Yeah.
And there was one day when I was getting ready and she came up to me and she was helping me with some things. And she looked at me, and I think she was maybe 2 years old at the time. And she said to me, I remember when I was the mom and you were the kid.
There you go.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, really? Tell me more, right?
Nicole, I think that's a great spot to go to too, because
Soul
there's
families.
a lot of research on kids with past life memories. And so there's so many things to tie in here. First of all, at the University of Virginia Department of Perceptual Studies, they've been working on this for 50 or 60 years. And they have a set of 2,500 kids that they have confirmed past life memories, sort of like our Ruby and JJ, where we had enough facts that they can make it go. And they've broken down lots of things. So it's interesting because you've had a near-death experience. When I was reading through some of the research, you find that some of those kids have memories of life between lives.
Oh,
It's really interesting because all of those kids report that time doesn't feel normal, that beings of light are there, people they've known in the past are there, that it's overwhelming love.
They didn't want to come back.
Yes, they don't want to come back. They don't want to be separated from that feeling of love. And yet they had to.
yeah.
And they think that they had people help them make decisions on their way back. That's an interesting piece of information, because if you listen to people with near-death experiences, many of them say, I had some sort of a quick past life review. I remember time wasn't normal. I remembered things before and after and time this way, and it all was one. And there were people I knew or people I felt, but I couldn't talk, but I experienced. And all of those things, I've had some of those same chunks of time, and some of the things that you've had probably in your near-death experience, you felt something that was different. You experienced it, but you didn't really talk.
Yeah.
And you knew things coming and going, but it didn't happen in order. And even past life review, when I've had them in between, they might show you a past life that was 4,000 years ago and then show you one that was 40 years ago, because the two lessons mattered together.
That makes sense.
Or
Lots.
repeat behavior. Yeah.
Yes. So did you see what you did then? And they see what you did now? Why haven't you figured this out yet?
And it's also interesting that a lot of people that say they were almost killed, they'll say, my life passed before me. Now, my own sister was in a car accident, and as she was going into the ditch, she said all of a sudden, all these memories flashed in front of her from her whole past. I'm thinking, yeah, well, she doesn't believe anything we say, but interesting that, it's there if you just pay attention to it.
Right.
And then if you start to, now, I know what the arguments are, that this is just chemical reactions in your brain as you're dying, and you make up all this stuff, and you have these kids who don't have this, have the same when they're dead and not back yet. Their memories are the same as you who had a near-death experience who has this, which is the same as the experience that I had during meditation, and I wasn't dead. Okay, the experiences are the same. And there is some form, I'm gonna just throw this out as, because you said you like science.
I love science.
Okay. We know in a quantum physics world that this quantum field exists, but nothing exists till someone observes it.
Yes.
Okay. So there must be a first observer, a first consciousness that has something. If you want to start that the first consciousness is God, I'm really okay with that, because that consciousness creates a whole series of consciousnesses that are exposures or blanks or pieces of love that shoot out in all directions. This is the experience that I had
In the beginning.
In that.
Yeah.
And so you see this entire grid explode out, which is lights and bits of light, points of light, a spark of love from God. I don't care the way you want to say you experience it, because when I talk to people with near-death experiences or talk to people who have past life experiences, all of these same words come out over and over again, that this experience spreads out. And that as we spread out, we continue to learn and learn more and more, and we spread out more, and we connect with more and more people until we possibly cross the lives of everyone at some time before this is done.
So tell me about the dodecahedron.
Yeah.
And so
can I just say something in
Sure.
there to kind of like add to that, or say it with a different flavor, or, you know, from another angle? Maybe somebody out there needs to hear it this way too. Is it's almost like this yin yang, right, of energy,
Right.
of
Mhm.
God and us, right? Because
Mhm.
Correct.
there seems to be a lot of tension when you talk about we are God, right? God is us, we are God. It's all this oneness in the
Right.
first place.
Because
if
God is in everything.
Yeah. So if
So God is in
everything,
you.
how do you you know, disengage from being God, a God particle, however you want to put it, that you're part of God. Therefore, if you are a particle of God, you make up what is God. So we create God in our image, right? Meaning whatever cultural aspect, whatever religion you follow, there's the sets of rules, or, you know, the guidelines that you follow, and the perception that is created within you, whether it's, you know, God looks like Jesus, or a God looks like, you know, Brahma, or any of the Hindu gods. But actually Hindu gods, there it's all aspects, all the gods are aspects of the one God, right?
Or the one
Yeah.
God. Correct.
Oneness, right?
Oneness.
And so I always found all these different cultures, Buddhist, Hindu, Muslim, Christian, all of the different ones, it's, we look at it how we see it. We create God in whatever image that we see God as. And that's what we will see or depict in our perception of, like, in near death. If
Correct.
you're going to see God, you're going to see your God, however you define God as. And God sees us, and even still out there, it's all this oneness. If you were to open your eyes and look at somebody, you would not be able to tell the difference between them, your brother, and you, because that connection is there. You lose the face, you lose the meat suit, as people say, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
So-
if you look at the stories of reincarnation and the experiences, you really discover that I am you and you are me, and that I'm going to have every experience. Otherwise, I can't understand you.
Yeah.
And so, and we have past lives that follow that pattern, where we've been Scottish fighting the English, the next life English fighting the Scottish, the next life Viking fighting the Scottish, and then fighting the English again, realizing that us or our family has fighting on the opposite sides of the same war.
So were we right or were we wrong?
We're not
We
either.
were right and wrong.
Whose side is right? Neither
Yeah.
side is right.
Nope.
Both
No,
of us
because
are
opposites are the same. They're just a different degree.
Yeah.
correct. And so that experience starts to come through when you feel this way, and you start to realize, I can't judge you because I don't know your experiences, but
Mm-mm.
someday you will have all of the same experiences that I have. And so then when we come back in oneness together, you and I will will know each other because we will have lived each point of every single life on the opposite sides together.
Yes.
We're really one coming back together. Or if you want to talk about this is the science, if you're talking about some of the theories on consciousness, that it exists, that God exists on this level, or consciousness exists on this level, then really we're just portions of the consciousness jumping back and forth into various lives.
Yeah, it's kind of like kids playing with toys, and somebody goes over and says, "Hey, let me try." And they try that toy. And then
Right.
they're done with that. And it's like, "Hey, wait, let me try that."
Or the other experience that this is a lesson for people when they are facing struggles in life. You may have a parent who was an alcoholic. In the next life, you may come back as the child, you were a child of an alcoholic. The next life, you may come back, you're the alcoholic with a child who's an alcoholic. Because someone along that path has to say, no, it stops. And that's how you start to change the patterns that are happening down the line. Somebody has to say, no, I'm not going to repeat the sequence.
And quit the generational curse, right? Stop it.
Stop the generational curse. Absolutely.
You were going to mention dodecahedron. So
Okay.
make sure we don't forget that.
This is a good thing because, and this is our experience and the experiences Isabella has talked about this. If you return to home, the unseen realm, the spiritual world, because I don't care
What label you put on it.
Heaven or whatever, it feels comfortable. It feels safe. It is a home. And Isabella says it's designed as a set of stacked upon itself dodecahedrons. Now that's a 12-sided thing with 5 sides. And it's really an interesting thing as she was telling this concept. She says, because it's such a strange thing that you can't imagine, but when it's stacked together, there is no empty void. It all fits together. That's part of the lesson. It all fits together. It has 12 sides because it reaches out and connects in 12 different directions. And then those people connect to 12 different directions, so that if you extend out far enough, this becomes an entire universe of, if you want to think of it, or an entire cone, which twists upon itself, which ends up looking like an infinity sign, where every point is reconnected to some other point. This is, she says, if this is what you visualize, you will see this. And then in the pod itself, the dodecahedron, when you look out, no angle is exactly the same. It's not like being in a box. It's not a square box. Every angle is different because it's a 5-sided and a 12-sided, or 5 and 12 in this thing. That whatever angle you look, light reflects from a different direction. No matter which direction you look, it's different.
Angel light.
Because it completely encompasses who you are, from a light that shines from all directions, from every angle. It's not just one angle, because you don't come back as just one angle. You are the multitude of the experiences that have happened, and they're all saved, and that's subconscious. And every experience, we use positive and negative, but this is what science believes, that the subconscious saves. Subconscious saves us in modules in the brain, connecting everything as a positive and a negative experience. so that you make your next decision based on how many positive things have happened related to this event, and how many negative things have related to this event. And so you make your final decision because you have 40 positive things and 2 negative things related to the same issue. That's what science says happens in your brain. It's interesting because that's what happens with a consciousness, subconscious that follows you life to life, except it's not just this life, it's every life that starts to make you grow. So your decisions are based on all of those decisions, all of those events that have happened in the past, even if you don't remember them.
Okay, so I have another question that came up in my head because of this.
Okay.
So people who have had a lot of lifetimes, right? The old
Correct.
souls that are around.
Right.
And let's say if we come in as this old soul who has had a multitude of lifetimes and all of this knowledge and wisdom, would you say, whether it's opinion or not, okay, would you say that that person has, because they have this database, be it subconscious possibly, this database of all of these probabilities and things that happened, right?
Right.
Experiential data. And because they have more points of that data, they then are more aligned with the other side, the soul, however you want to put it, to make those conscious decisions for themselves in that kind of support the best moves forward, right? Because they
Correct.
have more of this data to go by versus somebody else who is like, I'm just going off of, well, this was bad this time, so I'm never doing that again, right? And then subconsciously encoding that in, even though that very thing could be what saves them.
Right. I think, Nicole, I'm going to say that it doesn't always work that way. I think there are people with multiple experiences that grow and become more open to the experience, and they do start to have that form of guidance. There also seems to be a pattern of people who are so resistant to ever believing anything that they're resistant to even their own experience.
Ooh, right there. That what you just said, that some people they experience so much resistance because they're so resistant to their own experience.
Yes.
Wow.
And so there are people who come back making the same mistake over and over and over and over because they refuse to accept that they're part of a whole.
Yes.
And the problem with that is sometimes God will ask us to come back to help that person. And when we come back, we're starting over again. All of our brownie points go out the window and we start over again.
We don't really call them brownie points.
Well,
but, you know.
I like brownies, so I like to say that. But you're starting over again, which means you still have to keep in mind that you're living a life without conceit, selfishness, jealousy, and unforgiveness. Even though you have come back to help that person, you agreed to come back, but you're running the risk. So for them to take that for granted is really unfair. So it's really difficult to know that you came back to help somebody. In our case, we know this time, we did come back to help a couple of people. And when they don't help us, I have to daily say to myself, ooh,
well, and see,
be patient.
And here's where the rub comes in. If you were asked to come back and you knew you didn't have to, and you got to stay where love is everywhere, and you came back for someone else, and you're here, and the person doesn't listen, and you become frustrated, then you had a lesson to learn from frustration. So you needed to be here.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes total sense, and couldn't have come at, well, I'm not frustrated, but I've had that experience just recently with the surgery, where that's a whole other story that we don't have time to get into, which is on another recording anyway. But having that experience of going out there, knowing that I may or may not come back because I was given a choice. I made my way back for reasons.
Yeah.
For a reason.
For a reason.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that would have been a little scary.
And I was actually shown some future exit points that are like, almost like, it's okay if you decide now. You've got all these exit points later.
Mhm.
And it's not even scary.
It just depends on your choices and everybody else's, since they all interact.
Exactly.
It would be scary knowing that you're going under and not knowing.
Well, that was a crazy experience, which was pretty wild. With, I think I made the decision right before I got on that table, because I had sent a message to a friend, and I basically was thinking about my friend in particular, a good friend of mine, and I said to her, remember these words. I have to come back. I have business unfinished here.
Yeah.
I have a lot of unfinished business here to do. So that was it. Like, remember those words. And when I got on the table, I went out. I actually went and I visited this person among a bunch of other people, saw guides, beings, entities, whatever.
Yeah.
Got a download, got a whole bunch of information, understood that, I had this as a potential exit point to stay
Mhm.
and be in that energy or come back. And I came back. I had a really hard time settling back into my body. It was really difficult. And like, there was this conscious effort that I was trying to make, and this body is so weak. Like, the human body is so weak.
Hmm.
And I was still like, okay, open your eyes, do this. And like, the nurse kept telling me I had to breathe and
Mhm.
deep breath. And I'd take my breath in. And as I'm taking the breath in, say to myself, oh yeah, I wasn't breathing. And then as soon as I let the breath out,
Mhm.
I was back out. And I kept doing that over and over again. But my friend called me after I had gotten home and said, I don't know what you were doing. I had looked at the time. It was 9:50. It was turning 9:52 when I was wheeled in. And I was on that table minutes later. And then she said, I don't know what you were doing between 10 and 10:10, but I felt your presence in my car. And I said, hello, Nicole.
Mhm.
And it was like we had this telepathic conversation around, do you stay or go?
Mhm.
And you had a choice. And you were kind of in that space of like figuring out, am I
Mhm.
going to stay or am I going to go? And I said to you, you have to get back there.
Because what you're not done with what you're
You
supposed
have
to
to
do.
come back. We have a lot of business unfinished here to do. So you go get back there. We're not done yet.
Yeah.
And when she said these words to me, I was like, jaw dropped. I'm still, high on meds, but I was like, I was trying to think in linear terms that I couldn't, because of the medications were still affecting me.
Yeah.
I just said to her, well, we're going to have this conversation again, but I can't believe that you're saying these exact words that I said to you.
Mhm.
Yes.
I would say it's safe to think she's a soul family member.
Yes,
You
we've
probably had
already
many lives
determined
with her.
that.
Yep.
Yes.
Yes, there definitely is this thing, and some things that keep unfolding, and subconsciously I even had said to my boyfriend, like, I came back for you. And I said it, and then I was like, whoa, I
You
did.
knew it.
I knew
You
it.
knew it.
And it was like,
Yeah.
oh, because it like, I mean, I could apply that to a bunch of people, So having it come out very subconsciously right away, I was like, oh, well, that's interesting, because, some things that I have been thinking about and what unfolds has become a really interesting journey. And the information that you've dived into with me here today is so invaluable to people, that myself, getting it out there, and people in the world, that I really thank you guys for being here. Is there anything else that you want to, or you're getting the message that somebody out there needs to know before we close out?
So Nicole, I'll say first, for the last point is we're infinite beings, so no suffering really matters. Try to get that part.
Yeah.
And even in your choice, you came back, and usually if you're coming back from a near-death experience, your body, you literally have to put your body back into a body that hurts.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that's true is, remember that experience is really the basis of all language. So we're here for experiences, because someday all of this will collapse back to the one. And when that does, you will communicate to all others based on what you've experienced. And until you haven't experienced, you can't communicate at all. And it doesn't matter whether it's telepathic, word, touch, whatever. It's the fact that you had the experience, which is how language develops, which allow you to communicate. So you had to come here in order to talk, communicate when you return.
And I'd just like to say, everybody should remember that we are all indeed responsible for our own actions. We do not get to pass them off onto Jesus or anybody else. When we come here, whatever we do, it's our own responsibility to clear it up, get over it, or we're coming back to do it again. So if it's not pleasant, it's not happy, you're going to come back and do it again. So make it right.
Words of wisdom. Go
Mhm.
live your life in whatever authentic way that is you and aligned with what it is that you want to create. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Correct.
good words.
All right, everybody. I hope that you really enjoyed this. It's been a fantastic show. And I just want to say, Dr. Dave, Carla, how can everybody reach you? What are the next steps if somebody is listening to this saying, God, I need to follow them, and where do I go? Which it's in the description, guys. So just go there.
Yeah, the best way to reach us is to go to our website, which is thegiftoffastlives.com. There's actually, if you do the contact us and email us directly, we have answered every email that's ever come. So we will, if you send us a question.
And you can
Excellent.
purchase any of our books on there, but certainly you can go to Amazon or Barnes and Noble or your local bookstore.
Anybody
know.
can order them. So if you have a local bookstore that almost went broke during COVID, go order a
Use
local
them.
book, because they can still order it too.
Excellent, excellent. And just a thought that with your books or any other books, that if you want to purchase an extra one and donate it to your local library, because there's always that option too.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
If you
Share
live
with
where
us.
we do, we've donated to our library too, because
Yes.
it just makes sense.
Small city USA, though, I think we scared the hell out of them.
No.
If there was such a hell. Ah.
Oh, that's funny. Okay, well, thank you so much for being my guests of honor today. And all of you out there, drop in the comments what you loved most or what it is that you'd like to hear next. And maybe we'll just have Dr. Dave and Carla come back. So until next time, see you later and go live a life you love living. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Nicole.
Night.
Thank you for joining us for the Magic and Miracles podcast, where everyday folks like you share their life-changing stories. The world wants to hear your extraordinary story, so is it about time you tell it? You might just end up being someone else's miracle waiting to happen. If you would like to be a guest on the show, please submit your application for consideration. If you would like to nominate a guest or submit a personal story to be read on the show, please contact us via email. In the meantime, Enjoy the journey. You never know when you will experience a miracle that will change your life forever, or if you will become someone else's real-life angel. Goodbye for now, and see you on the next episode of Magic and Miracles, the podcast with wings.